Um, Salesforce Security is not a neat and tidy set of features. They're kind of spread all over the place. They don't always make sense. And there's a lot of features that have a lot to do with security and access, but aren't really considered security features. So what I was trying to do is, number one, not bore everybody, but number two, tie these things together in a way that would maybe make it cohesive or feel like it's part of the same thing. So in this presentation, I'm going to use a fictional town to create an analogy that gives an overview of security in Salesforce. After we do the town analogy, I have a couple examples of work that I've done related to security that I thought would be, useful to talk about. So we have this town analogy, and in most respects, this is kind of a normal town that anyone would be familiar with, but really it's owned by our client. So the client can be as ruling as an iron fist as they want. They can be very picky about how this town is used. So let's say we've been hired to ensure that all the visitors in the town abide by the rules that the client requires. Some of the key points that we'll talk about in the town is the entrance to the town, the bus stops, so where people get dropped off, our buildings, the relationships between visitors, what they're wearing and what that tells us, keyed entry, warning signs, and all normal towns have X-ray goggles. So let's start with the town entrance. Our visitor has a bus pass, so they're about to enter the town, and they have their user. So they can travel around the town within the limits of the company. But at this moment, when we're not even in Salesforce yet, there are a lot of controls and aspects that the company can have a say in. So that would be like login hours, IP restrictions. So IP restrictions are like, where can they log in from? Multi-factor, so what do they have to do to prove who they say they are? Password reset frequency, and of course, the entrance can be branded. So once they get on the bus and start traveling around the town, they can't just get let off wherever they want. The company has a say, and we as admins have control over setting where they can get dropped off. So these are our Lightning apps. Once they're at the bus stop, like any town, you look around, you only really have access to what's in that part of the town. You see your buildings around you, your objects, and maybe you can access your personal settings, which let's say the getting a haircut. So at our bus stop, we've got our tabs, Lightning page layouts, Visualforce pages. We have actions like tasks, email. We have communications like our live chat, our call, our chatter, and dynamic forms. So once we start walking around, we have the very core features of Salesforce, that original spreadsheet analogy, which is our objects, our records, and our fields. So there's a basic level of security to our objects. Like a town, some are going to be open to the public, anybody can walk in, and some are going to be private, so only open to the residents or their friends. The thing about these buildings is that some of the visitors might be encouraged to interact with these spaces, to be changing the content. So like, let's say you go into a grocery store and you walk down one of the aisles and there's a guy wearing a grocery store vest and he's restocking the shelves. Like, you don't question that. Like, he's supposed to be there. He's supposed to be doing that. So our Salesforce features that are going to play into our buildings, rooms, and furniture as our org-wide sharing, our record types, field access, page layouts, things like that. So you get into the grocery store and you notice there's other people there. You're not alone in this town. And the thing about other people is other people have the ability to interact and grant access depending on one-to-one sharing. So maybe their generosity, they just want you to have access. But there's also their roles and how they're connected to you in the hierarchy, which gives you access. So your role hierarchy, your manual sharing, things like teams, queues, public groups all play into relationships and generosity. Now, opportunity access settings is something interesting where it's very tiny. You don't even notice it. It's in the role setup. And sometimes these little settings like this can have a major impact. So if you are the owner of an account and you check the box and suddenly you have access to every opportunity, no matter who the owner is, if the account's connected to it. So that also means that anyone who has access to all of your records also now has access to all of those records. So some of these can have a big span. So the company requires that all visitors wear a uniform at all times. This is something that you get, maybe you change it at some point, but really it's like rock solid. It defines in large part kind of what your default your basic access is after we talk about like access to the buildings, like the org-wide hierarchy. So permission sets, on the other hand, are very similar to profiles, but they can be worn in a temporary capacity. So let's say our visitor, Fran, always wears an electrician's uniform, but Fran's gonna go away on vacation for 2 weeks. So Jackie, she can't change her uniform. She's an accountant, but she might wanna help out with some of those requirements while Fran is gone. So she's gonna put on an electrician's accessory, let's say a belt or a hat or something like that. With this permission set, it can be set to expire after 2 weeks. So as an admin, you don't really have to think about that again. The thing about the permission sets and the profiles is they're a hub for so much security that I can't even list everything here, but an overview would be like our system permissions, our object settings, access to permissions, flow, Visualforce, Apex, apps, and things like that. We also have our permission set groups, and occasionally these permission sets come with licenses, which is an additional feature. Is everybody still with me? Are we okay?
Yes.
Doing good.
Okay. All right. So a couple more slides. So 2 more things I want to talk about. One is key cards and keys. So the company has a lot of rooms that they need to keep track of. And sometimes, unlike the uniform, which is a big sweeping set of access, our company might want us to make access changes in a way that's incremented or small. So custom settings and custom permissions are going to be very useful. We can change the locks on the door. The custom permissions are going to be like a single key that goes to a single lock. And we can control it kind of based on conditions. It might be like, what day is it? What status are we in? And the custom settings essentially can do a very similar thing. There's just more options to it. In the same way that a key goes to a single lock, a key card can be programmed for multiple locks and can be changed from time to time or remotely. These features play into our visibility settings. They can play into our validation rules, our permission sets, Apex classes and triggers, custom metadata types, and a lot of other stuff. So up till now, we've talked about security features that essentially give access. The way that Salesforce is set up is you limit access by not giving it. An exception to that rule would be what I'm calling warning signs or validation rules. So validation rules is a unique instance where we can actually give somebody access, but then revoke it. And we can revoke it conditionally based on certain factors. So if rules are meant to be broken, the company was not aware of that adage. If somebody in the town breaks a rule, a warning sign stops them in their tracks. Like it's a notification that's put up on the screen like instantly, and they're not allowed to move forward until they fix it. Now, fortunately, there's no citations in Salesforce, so they'll just need to find a different path to figure out what they need. On the next slide, I'm going to talk about some considerations to visibility settings, but I think this is an important point to make on this slide, and that is that not everything has to be behind lock and key. A lot of times, access has to do with getting where you need to go. So keep in mind, if you block somebody's access, and I've had this happen so many times in the last month, they're going to try to go around that and find a different way to get there. So you might be creating a problem for yourself by using validation rules. And it's just, worth being aware of. I have a very fastidious and excitable client who likes to break my things. Anyways, this feature lets you take access away conditionally. So field changes, dependencies, user restrictions, this is really based on conditions and actions. So that's not a specific feature. It's more of a condition. All right, now, obviously every town has X-ray goggles, but the interesting point to the X-ray goggles in this town is that when the users come in, they're fitted with these goggles and they don't actually know that they're wearing them. Visibility settings are very powerful, and I think they're often underused because, again, like I was saying, you don't have to put something under lock and key if you can help somebody get to the information and the changes and the functions in Salesforce that they need. What's also powerful about them is how many things can impact the visibility settings. It might be somebody's uniform, it might be their bus pass, their key card, their relationship, their name. It can be many, many different things. So we're able to hide or reveal these components in Salesforce for specific users, and also occasionally based on conditions. Most of this is going to happen on our Lightning record pages, but visibility settings are also powerful. I'll show you in an example in a little bit in screen flows, in page details, in related lists, and again in dynamic forms.